Oh, there we are. I'm back for the second half of today's podcast. It is, like I mentioned, the 24th, Christmas Eve day. And this will be the podcast for tomorrow on Christmas Day. So we're just going to repeat what we record today. The cough in the background is from my lovely daughter, Molly, who is going to sit in with me here for the second half of today and tomorrow's podcast, as she is occasionally wont to do. Do you remember all those Christmas shows we used to do back in the day when Kathy would produce all that beautiful music and I would read from the book of Luke and
Oh Holy Nightmare.
Oh Holy Nightmare. And what else? The Latka who couldn't stop screaming.
And The Night Before Christmas.
Night Before Christmas. Oh, my God.
I was thinking about it earlier because obviously we always did the Christmas show together, but there was a period there when I was 9 or 10 where I was on your show every single Friday. I'd come down to the studio every Friday night in my pajamas and we'd do maybe 10, 15 minutes together, and then I'd go up to bed.
Yeah, I sort of do remember that. It's getting harder and harder for your old man to remember anything, but yeah. But those Christmas shows were a lot of fun. Of course, that was when we did talk radio, and they were 3 hours long, which seems interminable now, now that I just do an hour podcast. But anyway, here we are. Molly's home from college. She'll be here for another week or so, and then back to the grind. If you don't mind, I would like to talk to you about two current topics, not necessarily Christmas. I did some Christmas stuff during the first part of this podcast, but I wanted to get your opinion about Trump wants to control Greenland and the Panama Canal. Those are not ours. And the thing to be aware of, it's been in the past 2 days that the Orange Bastard has made clear that he has designs for, what would you call it, American imperialism? I mean, what the hell? This is year 2024. And he's declared that the United States has security concerns and commercial interests that the United States can best handle by owning, once again, the Panama Canal and Greenland, either outright ownership or under American control. And I just have to ask you, not specifically, Molly, but just generally speaking, what do you think of that idea?
Well, I think it's ridiculous that such a American-first populist politician here is so concerned with territorial expansion and foreign concerns abroad. I mean, I think he was quoted in one interview for saying he wanted to maybe trade Puerto Rico for Greenland. And Puerto Rico is a territory that we have. There are people in Puerto Rico who suffer great inequality because they're largely ignored by American politicians in D.C. that need our help and care and attention. They don't need to be traded for Greenland. I mean, in what world is it okay that Puerto Ricans have to pay taxes and can serve in the army but can't vote?
Yeah, we had a revolution in this country about similar affairs with Great Britain. You and I and Kathy have been to Puerto Rico a number of times, and you and I will agree that it's a beautiful country. It's too bad, or it's a beautiful area. It's not really, well, it should be a country. It's only because of the Spanish-American War that it's ours to begin with. And I have, for a long time, been in favor of Puerto Rican independence. Do you remember the time we were there and there was a demonstration going on? There was a bunch of people marching, and they were marching against a local, I think it was local, probably owned by people in the mainland here, a local power generating station, and they wanted to cut down a bunch of the jungle, the forest, ruin a bunch of streams, and put in oil pipelines and generate electric power. Do you remember that?
I don't, but it makes sense to me.
I think you were about, I don't know,
4?
No, you were older than that, maybe 7 or 8 years old, and we'd stopped at a little restaurant way out in the back country, you might say, of Puerto Rico. It was near one of the beaches out there, and it was very low population, and I could hear the chanting off in the distance, and while you and Kathy sat at the table ordering something, and this was a very primitive style restaurant. I can't even call it a restaurant, just an eating place. How about that? But I got up and went and took a look, and I came back in and I said, Molly, come on, there's a demonstration. Let's go march. And we went out there, and one of the girls organizing, or the leader of the march, was bilingual in Spanish and English, and she told us what was going on. So you and I tried to chant what they were chanting in Spanish.
Oh my gosh!
And it was kind of comical. I had Spanish classes in high school, and I think you hadn't started Spanish classes yet. But there we were trying to phonetically chant what these demonstrators were, and it was kind of pathetic, but at least our hearts were in the right place, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, enough about Puerto Rico. Trump apparently, and who knows about this, what's in Trump's twisted brain, but I wonder if he realizes that Denmark controls Greenland, that it's a Danish, I mean, it's not their country, but they control the defense affairs for Greenland. They control foreign affairs for Greenland. They're more or less kind of like the British Commonwealth would be back in the day to their constituent countries. But it just seems kind of, on the one hand, very weird. On the other hand, in keeping with Trump's ignorance, that he thinks all he has to do is tell the people of Greenland, hey, we're going to come and take over.
Well, he said it himself. He's a real estate developer. I think he compared Greenland to seeing a tract of land that you need to put a new apartment building on. And so he doesn't see foreign affairs from the political, really intense intellectual standpoint that you need to approach international relations with. He sees it as something you can kind of under the table trade, and now you own a whole tract of land around the Arctic Circle. He doesn't see things the way politicians or the people,
normal people
at the end of the day, normal people do.
Your field of study is international development.
Almost.
Almost?
So right now I'm majoring in politics and environmental studies, but when I get my master's, that's going to be in international development.
What, just for shits and giggles, what does that mean for those of us? You've told me about 7 times, and I try to retain what you tell me. But what is international development? What does that include?
Well, for me in particular, I'm approaching it from a concentration of environment and sustainability because I'm really impassioned about climate change. So it's about observing how inherent inequalities entrenched between the global north and the global south have developed over centuries and left people at inherent disadvantages, left them behind in development in ways that they can't get out of. I'm very focused on how climate refugee isn't an officially recognized refugee status. You can't have your island, say if you're a person in the Marshall Islands, you're a Marshallese person, and your island goes underwater, you can't flee to another country under a climate refugee status. You can't say, I'm a refugee because my island went underwater. That isn't a valid reason to be a refugee and seeking asylum in another country. And I think that's wrong. And this is something that I really want to explore and look into and expand on. I'm interested in learning more about carbon credits and biodiversity credits and the ways in which they are vastly ineffective and aren't changing things for the better, but it all plays how into people see climate change as a geopolitical issue and an economic issue, first and foremost, something that they can manipulate, something that they can profit out of, instead of as an issue that's going to kill us all if we don't do something yesterday.
Well, it's just like the refugee or undocumented worker, undocumented person who is fleeing to this country from Central America. So many of those people are refugees from the climate destruction in their countries, like the Central American countries, right? I mean, you know about this.
And the climate crisis increases tensions, which heightens security issues, which causes more people to be in these intense political issues where if a country has suffered a massive hurricane that was never going to hit if the temperature wasn't rising so rapidly, then there's destruction, people aren't organized, the government in their country isn't reacting fast enough. People get angsty. The National Guard, it fuels more and more terror and strife. So as long as there's climate change, there's going to be heightened tensions. Things are going to get more intense and difficult and riotous.
Well, the situation, I've brought this up a couple of times on the podcast, the situation in Syria, the horror of what Bashar al-Assad did to his own people, the poison gas, the bombing, the Russians helping Assad try to stay in power. And anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million Syrian people were killed by Assad, by their own government. And that started as a protest 13 or 14 years ago. I remember when this happened, farmers in Syria marched on Damascus demanding some kind of assistance from the Assad government because climate change was burning up their fields. They didn't have the kind of irrigation that they needed to sustain, to keep their lives going, their families going, their farms going. And Assad just turned the army on them and shot them, put them in prison. And it all started because of a climate situation. And my point has been, for the longest time, how many of us Americans are aware of that? And I was aware of it at the very beginning, but only because at the time, I was involved in talk radio, and these were subjects that kept popping up in the news about these huge demonstrations in Syria. Okay, what's causing them? Oh my God, it's global warming. And, 14 years ago, global warming was certainly an issue, but not the way it is today. And I just think about what you ultimately plan on doing is getting involved in that, right?
Yes.
Well, that's kind of scary. What do you? Where are you going to go to work? In the American Southwest or Southern Hemisphere or what? Where are you going to go, kid?
I'm figuring that out as I go.
Oh my God! Well, I'm going to miss you. So you're going to save the planet.
I'm going to save the people on the planet. I am not as STEM oriented as I wish I was. I would love to be a meteorologist or someone studying that sort of angle of environmental science. I'm more interested in saving the people who are suffering because of the climate crisis. I don't know how to stop it personally, and I'm going to support everyone who does. I'm more interested in the people who are suffering from the cycles of de-development forced by colonial exploitation hundreds of years ago and still persist today across every facet of geopolitics.
In your studies, let me ask you a really off-the-wall question. And to the people who are listening to this, just keep in mind that Molly and I don't rehearse any of this. We just sit down and I'll say, well, what do you want to talk about? And she'll say, well, it's up to you. It's your podcast. And I just have to pick something. You have made reference to me many times, not when we're doing a podcast or just when we're talking, when we're going for a walk and we're talking. And one of the central themes that you've talked about so often as you've grown up has been your perception of the exploitation of non-whites on this planet. Do you see any reconciliation of that ever occurring? Any, like South Africa, they had the conference after apartheid, what do they call it? The reconciliation conference. Forgiveness and reconciliation or something, where whites and blacks participated in an official government-sponsored hearing where people would testify as to what they had done during apartheid. And the deal was no matter how bad your crime was, you would be exempt from any kind of punishment or arrest if you just stated your case and told what you did or your organization did that led to the horror of apartheid. Now, did it work? I don't know. If you look at South Africa today, I think they are drifting towards a form of African-style fascism. The whole damn planet seems to be politically drifting toward fascism. But why your focus so much, you, just Molly, your focus on the mistreatment of Native people, Indigenous people, people of color?
Well, I was just about to say, through my studies in college and my own research and what I've learned, especially given the climate crisis, and I know I'm talking about that so much, it just really is the thing I'm most passionate about. We need to turn to Indigenous people, point blank, period. every continent, every person all over the world, we need to turn to indigeneity and indigenous teachings to get us out of this mess. Who has lived sustainably with the environment for millennia? Indigenous people. Who knows more about surviving and getting out of horrible situations in the face of constant adversity and genocide than indigenous people all over the world?
But how would indigenous people that I understand you're putting them in kind of an heroic status, and I tend to agree, but how would indigenous people deal with the digital age, with artificial intelligence? I mean,
indigenous people aren't all uncontacted tribes in the Amazon. Indigenous people exist all over the world in modern society. Just indigenous practices have persisted throughout the technological generation, throughout modern world. There are ways to blend indigenous futurism with our current modern state. I'm not talking about going back to living in the woods and wearing loincloths. I'm talking about looking to indigenous teachings and practices as a way to guide our life. In South America, they have a concept called buen vivir. It means good living. And it's enshrined in a couple nations' constitutions. And it's an indigenous teaching that means living harmoniously with nature, seeing nature as an individual entity that we have to respect and protect, just as we would another person or a family member. And so turning to these things, just getting out of the westernized, Europeanized concept of nature as a commodity, as something that we are completely divorced from. It exists over there and we exist over here. Instead of something that we constantly interact with, we come from, we live with it. That barrier, breaking that down, is going to change so much, because people need to see that the wildfires, the hurricanes, the cyclones, the tsunamis, the sea level rising, the volcanoes erupting, that impacts us just as it impacts nature. Deforestation impacts us. Desertification impacts us. We are a part of nature. And who teaches that? Indigenous people from day one. So we need to just reorient and let indigenous people be leaders.
But what are the chances of world leaders? And I think about the leaders of countries that we're all familiar with, whether it's the head of state in France or Israel or the United States or Canada or Australia or Russia, getting those people to understand the necessity of listening to native people or indigenous people. I mean, you take a look at Russia. There are, 50, 100, 200 different indigenous groups that live across that vast landmass. And who listens to them? I'll guarantee you that Putin doesn't. No. So how do you make that next step? I hear what you're saying, and that makes sense, but how do you make that next step?
Well, first of all, it's not going to be a top-down movement. It's got to be a bottom-up movement, starting with grassroots, starting with the people. It's going to have to be a revolutionary movement. At a certain point, and we're not quite there, but almost within the next probably 50 years, this climate crisis is not going to be something that even the wealthiest among us are going to be able to brush under the rug. It's not going to be something we can just say is happening out there, happening to others. If the temperature rises above 2.5 degrees Celsius, and it's already nearly there.
Above pre-industrial levels.
Yes, above pre-industrial levels. Mass extinctions are going to occur. The Earth is not going to be a place that all 8 billion of us are going to be able to survive and exist on. And a lot of those people are going to be Americans. A lot of those people are going to be Europeans. So it's not going to be a willing turn to indigenous teachings and practices and that sort of way of life, although it should be. It's going to be a last resort. It's going to be when people realize, oh shit, we're really doomed. And by then, it may be too late.
Well, all right. Then the key question for me to you, obviously I won't be around, but you're 20 years old now. You mentioned 50 years. 50 years from now, you'll probably be alive, barring some kind of something that's unforeseeable right now. But how does your generation deal with the idea that you may be facing your own extinction? I don't know how to put it into words, but how do you deal with it?
Well,
Wait. I know about young people movement, just like the Montana Supreme Court just ruled. Did you read that story?
No.
Montana Supreme Court ruled in favor of those kids who brought the lawsuit against, I think it was Montana.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The polluters? Saying you're destroying our future.
Right.
Yeah.
And the Montana Supreme Court said that they had standing, that the ruling was in favor of them. So I understand their youth movements, but how do you folks accept, you young people, deal with the idea that in your own lifetimes this stuff's going to happen?
Well, my generation, as I talked about the last time I was on the show, has a huge shift towards right-leaning politics, as is the rest of the world.
Right wing.
Yeah. A lot of people are becoming radicalized to the right. And I think, some of it is escapism. One side is saying the climate crisis is happening, we're all going to die. And the other side is saying, no, we're fine. You're going to make billions of dollars and everyone's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And people want to go to the other side because they're scared. But in my circles, in my very leftist progressive circles, in college, here in Atlanta, it's really easy, especially because this is my area of study, to sort of get lost in the doom and gloom of, oh my God, so much is going to change, so much suffering, so much strife. You can get so depressed just from spiraling down that hole. So what a lot of me and my friends do is sort of think of it as a push toward community, a reimagining of friendship and love. And if this is the life we're given, by God, we're going to make the damn most of it with each other, through each other, by each other. We're going to spend good time together. We're going to make beautiful memories together. We're not going to let the impending crises freeze us and paralyze us.
But that's not directly addressing the issue, is it?
You didn't ask how we were addressing the issue. You said, how are we reacting to it?
All right. How do you address the issue then?
What issue? How do I address climate change?
The issue of, a possible extinction of major forms of life on this little blue marble.
Organizing starts with radical love and senses of community. One thing about America is it pushes this intense individualism and nuclearism that's driven people apart. When you bring people back together in community, that's where organization starts. And if we want to have a grassroots movement that addresses the climate crisis all over the world, we have to go back to radical community organizing and acceptance. And hey, that's punk rock. That's the punk rock movement right there. So getting back into your punk rock of the 90s, look to those people, look to Riot Girl, look to Bikini Kill, and maybe we'll get some organizing started.
What's a Bikini Kill?
I'll tell you later.
What is that, a punk group?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The Riot Girls. What's the group in the old Soviet Union that was busted in Russia?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh God, Pussy Riot.
Yes.
Yeah, they went. 2 or 3 of them went to prison because they had the temerity to go sing their radical songs in a church, in a Greek Orthodox or a Russian Orthodox church. Oh my God! All right, Molly. As always, it's great fun to have you sit in with me. But for some reason, every time you and I sit and talk on a podcast, when it's over, I start to feel like there's so much I don't understand, and you do. How did that happen? I'm your dad. I'm older than you. I know stuff. How did we get to this reversal?
You were a good dad. You inspired me a love of learning.
Yeah, but it's gone too far. You know 10 times as much as I do.
Not 10 times as much.
All right, 5 times.
You have all the historical knowledge, and I have the contemporary scholarship.
Yeah, okay. That's the way of putting it. All right, we started this with Trump wanting to take over Greenland and the Panama Canal. We have about a minute left here. Do you think there's any possibility of this crazy bastard making that happen?
No, not making it happen, but maybe throwing the hissy fit of the century when it doesn't happen. Yeah. I think he just loves his empty promises. He loves saying anything that makes him sound like strong make the whole world America. I don't know. I I think that the first 2 or 3 months of his presidency are going to be some of the craziest. I think it's going to be executive orders galore. I don't think that possessing Panama Canal or Greenland is going to be part of that. But, I can't rule out anything at this point.
Because it's Trump.
Because it's Trump, because everything's crazy.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, thanks for sitting in with me. I guess it's time for us to go have a holiday party someplace.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy Hanukkah. And everybody, please stay safe. This program will be rebroadcast tomorrow, Christmas night, and then I'll be back with you live on Thursday. All right, take care. Keep it lit. I'm Mike Malloy. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. The Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.